Hey everyone, Omega X5000 here. I'm going to be real with you here. This is going to be mostly an update video that I want to be self-contained. If you want to just watch the gameplay without my commentary, I'll provide a link in the description to a playlist of music from Hyrule Warriors to go along with the gameplay. I have a lot to get off my chest and wanted to vent out my frustrations here while updating you guys on what's been going on. Which is why this is going to be post-commentary today. Right before I stopped updating all my currently running LPs, my grandfather on my mom's side of the family passed away. Because of that, I took some time off to mourn his passing, since I didn't want my sadness to bleed into my videos. Since I want this channel to be an uplifting place. During that break, my mother would go back to the now empty house my grandfather used to live in so that she could renovate the place so it could be sold off. She would do this every other week for the better part of 2 years. During the second year she did this, I started going up there with my father with her to help out with the renovations. We practically rebuilt the place over the course of a few months. It did get a bit dangerous in there, like this one time when we were replacing the ceiling tiles in the living room, and I got smacked in the head by a petrified tennis ball that got stuck in the ceiling years ago. That thing hurt. It was as solid as a rock, and I thought it was one at first. There was another instance where we were replacing a glass door, and as we were lifting it up to put the glass in the dumpster, the glass spontaneously exploded into a million tiny pieces. Nobody got hurt from this though, thankfully. Although, apparently a handful of glass shards got into my dad's pockets. Somehow. None of us are sure how this happened, especially since the opening to his pockets were facing away from the glass explosion. After all the renovations were complete, the house was sold in the early months of 2019. During that year, I wanted to take my mind off of everything and just started binging my large backlog of games, and made it my goal to clear out as many games as I could before New Year's. This was also the year where I started actively working on my top 10 Zelda games video, which is still a work in progress, but much more manageable at this point. One thing I wanted to do was to gather footage for every entry on the list, and I didn't want to use footage from other channels because I'd have to ask them for permission to use their videos for a video of my own, and I feel like I'd be a lowlife asking that of them since it would be using other people's work to promote my own channel. So I decided to just record all the games myself. God, that was a long sentence. That was 79 words. Why do I write these things like this? Yeah, I'm reading this off of a script so I can keep my thoughts in order. Anyway, that led me to live streaming on Twitch for a good while, because I can't trust my recording software to keep footage from anything besides the Wii U upon hitting the stop recording button. This is a recurring problem that I've had with my Game Capture HD over the years, is that it'll selectively turn anything that I record from my N64, GameCube, and Wii into an unusable black void of a video with no audio whatsoever that can't be rendered for editing. However, I found a loophole in that flaw. Apparently, If I live stream a video, regardless of the console, it will always save the footage. There's the occasional technical hiccup where the program would just stop recording for no reason, but it does somewhat warn me right as it happens so I can pause the moment it does. The way it warns me is by cutting off the feed of the game from my TV for a full second. Disruptive? Yes. Effective and keeps me from progressing beyond where it cut out? Very much so. Anyway, that's where I started streaming every Zelda game that's on the list with a few exceptions. Basically, every single live stream video that I've been posting to the channel every Thursday over the past few years was so that I could have a backup of the footage should something happen to my external hard drive that I store everything on. Over the course of that year, along with the Zelda games that I streamed, I cleared out many games for the first time. Those being Detective Pikachu, Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, Kirby Planet Robobot, Sonic Lost World 3DS, Metroid Samus Returns, great game, I highly recommend it, Sonic Mania Plus, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the World of Light, and collecting all the spirits for it, mostly, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Torn of the Golden Country, Splatoon 2, the Link's Awakening remake, Lego Marvel Super Heroes 2, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, the Switch version of it, Mega Man 11, Evo Land, Shovel Knight, and Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon. Quite a lot of long games in there, although most of those longer games I had previously started the year before, and I'm counting them when I actually reached the end credits for them. So I was able to clear out 17 games in that year. I tried to do the same with 2020. Whew, boy! 2020 came and went as possibly the worst year I've lived through. Everyone who's survived 2020 will know what I'm talking about. And there are plenty of videos out there documenting why 2020 was an absolute train wreck. When the pandemic began, the only thing that really affected me was that I could no longer take my morning walks to the boardwalk due to it now being more of a health risk than a health benefit. So instead of that, I replaced my morning walks with using the treadmill in my house. I also wanted to start up something that I completely missed out on during my high school and college years: dating. My New Year's resolution for 2020 was to ask out the girl I had a crush on throughout my high school years. But I was always too shy to talk to her. I decided I would work up the courage to just talk to her, get to know her, and hopefully ask her out. But then 2020 had other plans with the World War III scare, murder hornets, and the pandemic, to say the least. With the pandemic in full effect, I had to shelve my plans for the year until the pandemic was over and it was safe to meet up with people in person again. So in the meantime, I sought to pass the time with more of my gaming backlog. I maintained the mindset of clear as much of my backlog as I could to make this awful year go by as fast as possible, and I managed to clear less than half of the games I did in 2019. But once I list off the games I did clear, you'll see why I didn't clear as many. Xenoblade Chronicles 3D. 2 runs of Xenoblade Chronicles 3D's New Game Plus. Pokemon Sword, Pokemon Shield. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. And to top it all off is Shantae and the Seven Sirens. In hindsight, 2020 was the year of Xenoblade for me. And then things started to get weird. I celebrated my birthday in July with my family as always. 1 week later, I'm told that I'm moving out in a few months. Yeah, that happened. From that point, I began packing up everything to put into storage until we could make the move proper. Partway through, I was given this clacker that was all tangled up, and I spent about 5 hours untangling it while fighting off the urge to just cut the wires off with some scissors. I was initially extremely against the idea of moving, and for a number of reasons. First of all, is because of my scrap to New Year's resolution. The second reason was because of the terrible timing, what with the announcement being 1 week after my birthday. The third and most important reason why I was against it was because of the pandemic, where very few parts of the country are really safe to live in without having to worry too much about getting infected. While the area where I lived in was among the safest in the country at the time, if not the safest. I'm not the only one in my family that saw the issue of moving from effectively the safest place in the United States to somewhere less safe, even if it's only a few hours drive away. Although the reasoning for moving out when we did made a lot more sense than I thought it would. Since where I lived was in the safest area with the fewest confirmed cases, that would make the area much more attractive to people who want to move to somewhere safe from somewhere with more confirmed cases, which would inevitably cause New Jersey to become more of a hotspot for infections. That would, in turn, cause other areas in the country to become safer than New Jersey. And it took me some time to come to terms with this, but I've come to accept that it was necessary. That, and we chose to move because the cost of living in our new home is much lower than in New Jersey, since the house I lived in while in New Jersey was about a mile away from the beach. Around mid-November, we closed on the house and left New Jersey for our new home. That would be the ideal variation of this story. However, the owners of the house I moved into were lazy and didn't start packing up anything until about 10 days before they had to close on their house. The closing date for their house was on December 16th. That means that for the better part of a month, my family had to live in a rental with possibly the worst living conditions I've ever known. Well, first off, when we arrived at the rental, we almost missed the place entirely. But then again, that was entirely because of a combination of 3 factors. 1, it was already dark out. 2, we had never been to that place before. 3, it was also raining, making it even harder to see. We actually passed by it before I noticed a dip in the road off to the side that led to the driveway of the rental. The rental was about 5 feet away from a busy highway where I constantly worried about the very real possibility of a car accident happening and a car just crashing through our front door while we were there. There was so much traffic that you couldn't go a day without hearing cars zoom by. Not even at night, which often made it hard to go to sleep. The rental had several cracked windows, which made the wind howl like a banshee. The floor tiles on the base floor of the rental dipped down in odd places and made audible creaks while sinking in, to the point where we constantly worried we'd fall through the floor. There was also this one creaky spot in the floor of the main bathroom in the house, and you had to actively try not to make it creak, since it was practically overlapping with the toilet. Every time you walked over a creaky part of the second story, everyone on the floor below could tell where you were. The same could also be said for the top floor, as I could hear my brother pacing around in that room above me late at night quite a few times. There are actually a number of times where I just wanted to text him to tell him to go to bed already. I can hear you pacing. I feel like this rental was built with only the base floor and the second story in mind, with the higher levels as an afterthought. The railings to the upper floors were incredibly wobbly, like to the point where it seemed like you could easily break it off. The ceiling at the staircase leading to the top floor was built in a very lopsided way, which made it so that it was easy to hit your head on the ceiling as you go up the stairs. My brother used that top floor room as his room, and that made it awkward to get to him, and even worse is that the ceiling of that room is in a tent shape and very close to the ground. It didn't even have windows for natural lighting, so without turning on the lights, it's pitch black in there even in the brightest day. The Wi-Fi at the rental was garbage, as it would die on us at complete random at least 5 times a day and had to be reset every time. There's also a 10-minute cooldown every time that we had to reset it, so yeah. That made it so that I couldn't do any uploads while at the rental. Even though I really wanted to, it just was not feasible. I got the short end of the stick when it came to bedrooms in this rental. The room was a narrow rectangle, where half of the room was taken up by a wooden bunk bed on one side that I never used the top half of, out of fear of the thing collapsing while I lay down on it. Like, I was worried that the ladder to the top bunk would shatter just from me stepping onto it. So, instead, I used the bottom bunk, and there was just barely enough room for me to even sit on the bed itself without smashing my head into the top bunk. Actually, my head was resting directly on the bottom of the top bunk when sitting up straight. Next to the bunk bed was a table with a clock plugged into the only outlet in the room, which was hidden behind the bunk bed. I had to physically pull away the bunk bed just to be able to plug in my phone so I could recharge it. And right across from that was the closet, which made for a very narrow entrance to the room as the door opened inwards, making it very awkward for anyone to even enter the room in the first place, let alone exit it. I stayed in this room for 2 days before moving in with my brother on the top floor for another 2 days. With the top floor, as I said already, it's in the traditional tent-shaped roof style for a house, only very narrow. My brother had set up 2 inflatable beds on the sides, with a table and a lamp at the back of the room. However, as you can see in this image, the roof was very close to where your head could reach when getting up from bed. Both mornings I woke up there, I nearly smacked my head into the roof. It doesn't help that I had to either walk in an awkward angle or tilt my head 45 degrees to avoid hitting my head on the ceiling as I go down the stairs for literally everything. It was an actual pain in the neck just going up that staircase. After a couple days in the top floor, I moved again to another room, and this one was where I settled for the rest of my time in this garbage rental. It was actually a fairly spacious room. It had a nice bed and plenty of space to breathe and not worry about hitting my head on anything. The only downside is that it was at the front of the building, so the sound of ongoing traffic was at its loudest. There were countless cars, motorcycles, and ambulances passing by at all hours of the day, so it was often difficult to fall asleep at night. The only other thing that was off about the room was the wall-mounted deer head directly above the bed that was always staring at me as I used my computer with its cold, dead eyes. Although, it was nothing I hadn't seen before, as my grandfather had one in his rec room where the pool table was. So it was actually somewhat nostalgic for me. Despite constantly worrying about the floor collapsing from under us, the only thing in that rental that did break was the chair I was using at the table I had my computer set up at. The funny thing about that is that the chair fell apart because I got startled by a fly passing by my face, causing me to fall backwards in the chair and it got crushed underneath me. Thankfully, the owner of the rental said it was okay and didn't charge us extra for breaking the chair. This was, thankfully, during the final week of us being there. Speaking of which, we even started up a countdown calendar to count down the days until we left the rental and never looked back. However, the day before we left, there was a massive snowstorm and the owner forgot to dig out the driveway to our rental due to a miscommunication, meaning we had to dig it out ourselves using the shovels provided in the rental, since we couldn't drive to the storage unit that we kept our shovels at, because the cars were snowed in. December 18th was the day that we finally left that dumpster fire of a rental and were able to move into our new house. And only 2 of the rooms had actual beds to sleep in, so 2 of us had to sleep in the living room on a chair and the couch. I got the couch that first night and woke up with minor backaches. The next day I woke up and before I could even get out from under my bed sheets on the couch, I was told that my Aunt Terry, who was my dad's cousin, had passed away earlier that morning. That was a very tragic way to start off the day on December 19th, especially since that day was her birthday and we had planned to speak with her over FaceTime to wish her a happy birthday. This really hit hard for me. I was absolutely devastated. For several years, we would visit her at a nursing home that was about an hour's drive away from our house back in New Jersey. And more often than not, we were the only visitors she'd get, since the other family members that were directly related to her rarely ever visited her due to how far away they lived. So for that reason, we arranged to have her relocated to a nursing home closer to where I lived, so that we could visit her more often. And we did visit her more often. What was once bi-monthly visits became weekly visits that everyone enjoyed going to, even if it got to be a bit hard to hear what she was saying at times, due to her speaking tone gradually devolving into a very faint whisper. We were the only ones who ever visited her from that point on. And when it came time for us to start getting ready to move, we all agreed to not tell her that we were moving, because we didn't want to upset her with the knowledge that we were effectively leaving her alone in New Jersey. And at that point, she wouldn't be able to handle being moved to another state, to another nursing home. So from that point on, we had to avoid bringing up moving, and that was the only topic that I could think of when visiting her, and I couldn't even bring it up. I was able to get in one last visit before we moved out. From then on, we would FaceTime with her from the nursing home while pretending that we were still in New Jersey. She couldn't tell either way, since 90% of the time she had her eyes closed, even if she were wide awake. The 19th was when she had died in her sleep. Thankfully, not from COVID, but from natural causes. Ever since the pandemic began, I was hoping that nobody I knew or loved died from the virus. And as far as I'm aware, that hasn't been the case. I was hoping that I wouldn't suffer any personal tragedies during this train wreck of a year, but 2020 managed to pull out all the stops, despite me not wanting it to. I was absolutely devastated when I heard this news and wanted to take another long break to mourn. But I realized that I can't just keep doing that, so I took some time to get myself together and started planning out how I'd go about things. Especially since I couldn't start recording these videos right away because I stupidly packed away 90% of my game collection, including Hyrule Warriors and Pokken Tournament, as well as my microphone and tripod. And they were all in the back of the storage unit, and that thing was packed to the bursting point, as you'll see in this image. And that's not even a quarter of what we had packed away either. I've only been able to record this stuff for the last 2 or 3 weeks now at this point, and it's currently February 10th. Times have been rough for me on a personal level, and I hope you can understand why I didn't want to talk about it in the last episode. But with hindsight, I realized that my personal woes were nothing compared to what so many more people were dealing with throughout the pandemic in 2020, and even still in 2021. This video isn't going to go live until sometime in March, but I'm commentating this in early February. For all I know, the rest of the world may be on the road to recovering from the virus, or may have fully recovered by the time this video goes live. I don't know. I can't see into the future, so I won't pretend to know if everything has been resolved or if things have gotten 100 times worse. I just know that many people have gone through worse things than I have because of this pandemic, and what I've gone through is minuscule in comparison. Thousands of people have lost loved ones throughout 2020, and more are still losing loved ones in 2021. So yeah. That's why I haven't updated Hyrule Warriors, Let's Go Pikachu, or Pokken Tournament in a few years. A combination of grieving deaths in the family, being preoccupied, and doing my best to make the most out of these bizarre times we live in now. Things should be returning to normal for this channel after this video. So look forward to more misadventures in the adventure maps in Hyrule Warriors, the actual start to Pokken Tournament, and the continuation of Let's Go Pikachu, where I eventually showcase a now defunct event. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you next time with hopefully a more cheerful outlook on things, as opposed to a pseudo rant about current events.
Huh?